I'm Robert Martin. I'm 65 years old, and I've been retired for 7 years now. And I want to share something with you. There's a group of guys I see at my club. Most of them are in their mid-70s, a couple pushing 80. And over the last year or so, they've been giving me advice. Not in some formal way, just over coffee, after a round of golf, that kind of thing. And honestly, a lot of what they've told me has stuck with me because they've already been through the part of life I'm living right now. They've already made the mistakes. So if you're in your 50s or 60s and thinking about what's ahead, I think you're going to want to hear this. There are 10 things here, and the 7th one is actually something I've been struggling with myself. It's exactly what one of these guys warned me about, and it's a trap that a lot of us fall into. It might be too late for some of them to fix it, but it's not too late for you. So let's start with number 1. This first one might actually hit the hardest, and it comes from a guy named Frank who's 76. He told me to think about the 3 stages of life and make sure I don't miss the one magical stage that only lasts a short time. And when he explained it, it made total sense. When we were in our 20s and 30s, we had all the time in the world and we had our health because we were young. But we didn't have money yet because we were just getting started. Then comes midlife, your 40s and 50s, and now you're making decent money and you're still healthy, but time is the thing you don't have. Everything goes to your career and your family. Those are the 2 big ones, and there's just not much left over for anything else. Then stage 3, usually after retirement, your 70s and 80s. You've got all the time now, you've probably got the money, but your health starts to decline, or at least you're noticing changes. But Frank told me there's a magical stage in between, and that's when everything lines up. You've got the time, you've got the money, and you're still young enough in your late 50s or 60s to actually do the things that require some activity and movement. The problem is, a lot of people stay in that busy midlife phase too long. They keep putting off the trip. They keep delaying the adventure. Frank told me straight, someone in their early 60s is a lot more likely to go walk through Paris or hike through the Swiss Alps than someone at 78 who needs to think twice about the stairs. So don't miss that window. It doesn't stay open forever. And that actually leads into the second piece of advice. This one came from a few of the guys at the club, and it's about the 3 types of time. Because it's really common to prioritize 2 of them and completely forget about the 3rd. And if you do that, you end up hurting the other 2. Here's what I mean. You've got your career time, you've got your relationship time, and then there's the one most people ignore, which is recovery or renewal time. That's the stuff that gives you energy. The advice I got from these guys is that during those busy years, you need to figure out what actually renews you and then make time for it. What's the thing where when you're doing it, time just flies? Maybe it's walking in nature, maybe it's working out, maybe it's tennis or woodworking or something else entirely. One of the guys at the club, he told me about a friend of his who's about 55 and recently got back into rock climbing. He'd done it as a kid and through his 20s, then life got in the way. Now he's deep into it again, and it's becoming a bigger part of who he is than his career ever was. He said the guy actually thinks about his identity like a pie chart, which might sound odd, but it made sense. Career was still a big slice, family too, fitness and faith were in there. But rock climbing was growing and growing, and he was deliberately cutting back on career to make room for it. And he's doing this now, in his 50s, because rock climbing isn't exactly a forever sport. You can swim or bike in your 70s. Rock climbing has a window. Now, the 3rd piece of advice I've heard from the older guys at the club is that it's okay to say no more often, especially once you're in your 50s. Think about it. The first half of life, your 20s and 30s, you said yes to everything. And that's part of the reason you got where you are. You said yes to new opportunities, new responsibilities, and it opened doors. But the second half of life, you've got to realize it's okay to say no and actually respect your own needs. It's important to prioritize that recovery time we just talked about, and sometimes the only way to do that is to say no to other things and other people. It's okay to say no to social obligations, to work commitments, even to new opportunities. It's even okay to say no to friends if whatever they're asking isn't serving you. Prioritize the things that bring you real joy and peace. You've earned that by now. The 4th piece of advice from these 75-year-olds is something I think about a lot. They told me, remember, time is infinitely more valuable than money. That whole saying, time is money, is completely wrong. Time is something we have less and less of every single day. But money, if you've been smart with it, your money might actually be making more money for you right now without you lifting a finger. It's definitely not making any more time, though. Time is still the scarcest thing we have, even more so than whatever's sitting in our retirement accounts. And if you're in your 50s, this is a pivotal moment because it's going to set the tone for the entire second half of your life and how everything unfolds. But here's the thing, you've got to be intentional about it because time is only going to speed up from here. And you've probably already noticed that, how fast the years are going. That's something every single one of those guys at my club says, without exception. Now, there's another piece of advice connected to this, and it's about how we can't actually make more time, but there are ways to slow it down or stretch it out. I'll give you a real example. Think about your life as a timeline. You've got a certain number of healthy years ahead. Then there's a period where things start to slow down, and then there's an end. That's reality for all of us. But what if you made a decision in your 50s that created a real habit around fitness, cardio, strength training? Could that habit actually extend the healthy years you have? Could it at least push back the point where things start to slow? A lot of the research says yes, that's exactly what happens. Obviously, none of us know what tomorrow brings, but investing time and money in your health gives you some of the biggest returns you'll ever see. But there's actually a second way to get more time. You can't make it, but you can buy it. And you're already doing this. Think about something simple like an oil change on your car. You could watch the YouTube video, go buy the supplies, spend the whole afternoon doing it yourself, and maybe that's 2 or 3 hours on something you don't enjoy. Or you could take it to the local garage, get it done in 20 minutes, and spend those 90 minutes doing something you actually want to do. In that second scenario, you essentially bought back 90 minutes of your life, and you helped employ someone who's providing for their own family. One of the guys at my club told me he decided to hire someone to power wash his deck instead of doing it himself. He said he got 4 or 5 hours of his life back, and somebody else got paid work out of it. And a lot of the guys I know who've done well have this mindset of, I do what I do best, and I pay for the rest. Now, you have to make your own decisions about what makes sense, but if you can afford it, buying back your time is one of the smartest things you can do. The next piece of advice comes from a woman I know through friends. She's 69 now, and it's related to this idea of making more time. I was talking with her about a year after her husband had passed away unexpectedly. She was 68 at the time, and as you'd expect, she felt pretty lost. She was working through all the things that needed to be done, and she was also starting to think about what she wanted to look forward to in the coming year. She mentioned some ideas around travel, health, and deepening her faith, and she set a few goals in each of those areas. Over that year, we kept in touch here and there. She was doing better, but when I saw her in person again about a year later, I'm not exaggerating, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked completely different, vibrant, healthy, renewed. She told me she hadn't had any work done. What she'd done was build a few habits around physical health and mental health. She started doing regular yoga and workouts. She was spending time in meditation and prayer. She was 69, but honestly, she looked like she could have been in her 50s. She told me she feels like she added 10 healthy years to her life. And that's exactly what we were talking about earlier with that magical stage and extending it. She figured out how to make more time, or at least more healthy time. The advice here is to prioritize your physical and mental health in your 50s. If you can do that, you stretch out that golden window. Now, the seventh piece of advice. This is the one I was actually struggling with, and I'll be honest about it. It comes from a guy at the club who was about 6 months into retirement when he shared this with me. And it's very common for people in their 50s and retirees alike. I don't love admitting it, but I think it ties into what people call a midlife crisis. And it's about playing the status game. That's a term from a book by Will Storr, and it means we often buy things to signal success or to fit in with a certain group. But the truth is, those things rarely bring lasting happiness. This guy, 6 months into retirement, he was mapping out his plan and said he wanted to finally buy his dream car. Always wanted one, and now it was time to have some fun. He ran the numbers, it barely changed anything, so he felt good about it and bought it. A Porsche. 6 months later, I asked him how it was going, and you might already guess what he said. He told me, yeah, it's nice, but the excitement wore off in about 2 weeks. Looking back, he said, I probably should have just rented it for a month. That might have been enough for me. Now look, there's nothing wrong with buying nice things. I know there are car guys out there who disagree with this whole example. But the point is, it might be worth taking an extra 10 minutes before the next big purchase just to ask yourself why you're really buying it. And I'll turn this on myself because I wanted to buy a fancy watch last year. And when I really thought about it, here's what was behind it. First, it was validation. I wanted a visible sign of success, something that says I made it. That's the status game right there. Second, it was comparison and social pressure. We live in a world where we're measured by what we have instead of who we are. Third, it was identity and self-worth. When your identity has been tied to your career for 35 years and that's over, buying something expensive can feel like a way to affirm that you still matter. And then fourth, and this one hits hard, it's the fear of becoming irrelevant. As we get into our 50s and 60s, we might worry about fading in a world that values youth. Having something high status can make you feel like you're still in the game. So back to the guy with the Porsche. His advice was, see if you can rent the experience first before you buy the expensive thing. Looking back, he would have rather spent $3,000 or $4,000 to rent it for 30 days and see if that was enough. Instead, he spent something like $150,000 to figure that out. If you rent experiences first, you might spend some money on something you never own, but it could save you a lot in the long run. The next piece of advice comes from several of the guys at the club who always heard that expenses go down in retirement. But the exact opposite happened in their first couple of years, and then it took some adjusting to get things on track. I've seen this myself too. You plan for a certain monthly figure, let's say you figure $8,000 a month is plenty. You think about your expenses, you account for trips and maybe a car and whatever else, and you think that's a solid number. But then the first year of retirement hits, and suddenly you're spending more than you expected because this is the time, right? It's now or never. You're in that magical triangle where you've got the time, the money, and the health, and you want to use all three. The expenses just creep up. They adjusted, things are fine, but the advice is, start tracking your expenses now in your 50s. Use a tool, something that automatically categorizes everything at the end of each month. That way you can see exactly what you're spending on groceries, going out to eat, vacations, all of it. It gives you real data instead of guessing about what retirement is going to cost. The ninth piece of advice comes from a guy who actually retired in his early 50s, and with all that new free time, he focused on something he called connection. He told me that one of the first things he did was reach out to an old friend, someone who had been one of his best men at his wedding. They'd lost touch in their late 20s and 30s and 40s because life got busy. Families, careers, all of it. That period where you have no time. But now that he had the time, he called his friend up. And he said it was like they picked up right where they left off, as if they just talked yesterday. 20 years of silence and then boom, right back to it. I think that's the sign of a real friendship. But there were plenty of other guys at the club, the ones in their 70s and 80s, who said they wished they'd nurtured their relationships more in their 50s before retirement. It's easy to get swallowed up by work and daily responsibilities and forget to spend time with the people who truly matter. His advice was simple. Make an effort to reconnect with old friends. Strengthen your bond with your family. Be open to meeting new people. Maybe join a club. Find a group of people who share your interests, like that rock climber we talked about. Because those connections are what give you support and joy and a sense of belonging as you get older. And then the last piece of advice comes from a few people who had stressful careers. Hard-charging types who reached a point where they couldn't do it anymore, and all they wanted was to stop. They weren't worried about money, they had that covered. They just needed to rest. They needed the stress to end. But here's what happened. The ones who retired purely to escape work, 6 months in they were telling me, retirement is kind of boring, or is this really all there is? And the advice they'd give you is this. Don't just run away from something. Figure out what you're running toward. Plan for a retirement of purpose, not just a retirement of leisure. Start thinking now about what your purpose is going to be. It's never too early to explore the things you truly enjoyed or the things you forgot about since your teens or your 20s, and see how you can bring them into your life right now. Because this is the best stage of life ahead of you. You've got a lot to look forward to, and it's not too late. Take the advice from the people who've already been through it. Pick 2 or 3 things you heard today and actually write them down. Sit with them on a quiet morning with a cup of coffee. That's what I've been doing, and I can tell you, it makes a difference.